Okay, so first thing we will talk about today is the access modifiers, and then we will talk about the getters and the setters method and why we need getters and the setters. And if we have time, we will talk about inner classes as well. So let's get started. So we have basically four types of access modifiers. Okay, so you have four major type of access modifiers. One is the public, okay? Then we have is private, then we have is protected, and the fourth one we have is global, okay? Now, what is the meaning of public? So anything that you have marked as public, it will be available to everybody in that whole particular namespace. Okay. So think of namespace as a folder. So anything inside of that folder, everybody will be able to see it. So that is the meaning of public access modifier. When I say private means if you have declared something as private, nobody outside of that class can access a private thing, be it be a variable, be it be a method. If you have created something with the private access modifier, you cannot call it from outside the class. So from anonymous window, if I try to access a private method of a class or a private variable of a class, I won't be able to do that, okay? Because it is private. Now, protected always works in the form of when you talk about inheritance. When there is a parent class, okay? And inside of the parent class, you have created a variable which is marked as protected. So what will happen is any class which extends from this parent class will also have this protected variable. So only in the case of when you extend from the parent class, those protected variables or the protected methods will come along. Usually in the real world, you will mostly see a public or you will see global, and private will be for the variables. Okay. Protected is probably, I haven't seen much to be honest with you. But protected is an access modifier, which basically if something, so if there is a class A, okay, and there is a class B which extends from class A. Now, inside of this class A, you can declare a variable which is public, okay, or you can also declare a variable which is protected. So if a variable is marked as protected, class B will be able to inherit that variable as long as it is public or protected. Okay. Now comes the most important one is the global. Global means if you have usually when you are creating a APIs, okay, when you have an external system wants to call your system, okay, wants to call Salesforce. If you guys are not talking, please keep yourself mute. If there is an external system and they want to call Salesforce, then in order for them to call a particular REST resource, you have to declare that class as global. Okay. So global is something which is available across the namespaces. So if anybody outside the Salesforce would be able to access it. That's when you make it global. So there are four different ones: public, private, protected, and global. Public is within a particular folder, within a namespace, everything would be visible to each other. They can call it. Private, only the members of the class or within the class it is accessible. And then protected works in inheritance. So if you have inherited from the class, you will also inherit a protected member. And then you have is global, where it is accessible outside a namespace. Also, another external system can call your global classes. Okay. Any questions on the four access modifier we talked about?
So mostly we use public and maybe private, right?
We will use public, private, and when you are creating REST resources, then you will use global.
Guys, so global is just used for internal call out or
External
For
callout.
callout. External callout, sorry.
Yeah, external
External.
callout. Yeah.
Okay.
If there is a system that is trying to call your API, then you will create that class as global. That's the most important reason we need to use global keyword. Okay, so the variables always have to be declared as private. Now, why I mentioned that variables has to be declared private, the reason is, and then there should be getters and setters method around these variables. Okay, so you should create a getter method and a setter method, or you can use the get set that comes out of the box. Get set is there, and I'll show you what it is. So get set means nothing but a getter and a setter. So when you declare a variable as private, no, if somebody is trying to, so for example, if the variable has been declared as public, okay, there is a variable declare integer age, and anybody from outside this class can set up the value of age to -1. And there is no way for you to prevent something like this if you have declared the variable as public, because you cannot put a check here. But if you make this variable as private, you cannot do something like this. You cannot say object of the class dot of age -1. You cannot do that, because if you're trying to access an age variable which is marked as private, you cannot access it outside the class. So in order for you to access it, you have to go through the getter and the setter method. So in order to set the value, you can basically, inside of the setter method, you can test what is the value allowed. And if the value they are trying to set is a bad value, you can throw an error message or an exception right then and there. So if somebody is trying to set a bad value for your data, through the setter method, you can prevent that. But if you had made your instance variable as public, anybody can set up any value in it. So it is always recommended that you create your variables as private, your instance variable as private, and you create a getter and a setter method to access these variables. Okay? Any questions here?
Yes, I have a question. So you said that you don't wanna hard code the private the variable as a public, right?
Yeah.
Because you can bad data. You can somebody can use the bad data. What there is already a validation rule implemented,
How will you do validation rule here?
not in the Apex, but you know. Uh,
No, but if validation rules, you will apply it on a, first of all, on a data um, from the standard Salesforce objects, right? If somebody is
yeah.
trying to put a bad value, then you will do a validation rule. But this is an object of the class, right? And you are trying to set up something, then those validations won't kick in here. Or you can kick those validations too from here saying, no, you cannot kick those validations.
If you're performing DML in Apex, right, instead of data absurd.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
so
very
in
good.
the
That's, yeah.
yeah, that
Uh,
in case.
yes, you can do that. If you are trying to save this value somewhere and they're putting this age into some property, yeah, you can work around those things. But this is, think of validations in Apex. This is going to prevent, then they cannot be complex. You cannot test for this value and this value only for that particular field or that particular variable. If you try to basically make sure the correct value gets set up, that's when you will use a private instance variable along with the getter and a setter. Does it make sense? So for the validation rules, yes, you will use validation rule to um, before you save the record.
No, my question was like, yeah. So I understand that before you say frigate, but
Yeah.
my understanding is that what different is a validation rules? What's the difference between using the private variable and the validation rule? I mean,
The
what is why
validation,
we enforce a
yeah.
private variable instead of if we already have implemented validation rule?
Okay. So first of all, validation rules will work upon the particular object and the
Object.
fields, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So let's say this variable that you have created inside of the class, it is not part of any of these field
Account. Okay.
or anything.
Okay. Object. Okay.
Yeah, it is not there. You just have, you are trying to, you're not saving it on an account page, let's say. You're not doing anything that. But somewhere you'd, um, let's say you are basically, you're not saving it and you're sending it to the database, okay, to an external system. Now, before sending
Before save.
to
Before
the
saving.
external system, before you, at this point, you are not saving it into the Salesforce, so validation won't kick in. But
Yes.
before you pass it to another system, if you just want to validate the age or something, you can put a, for those cases, you will use it. But ideally, also, your variables should be private always, because that way you can control what goes inside of those variables.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay?
You want to control variable
Yeah,
for
you
the
want to
bad data.
control what goes in those variables.
Okay.
For the bad data.
Yeah.
Can you explain the get and set again?
Yeah. So get and set, we will do it, but let's first do an example, but let me explain to you. Get, so here, let's say you declared a variable name, and you can create out of the box, you can define the getters and the setters, okay? That is automatically given to you by Salesforce, or you can define your own getters and the setters, and get method is used to return something, okay? So whatever this name is, it is going to return that value. And set is basically to basically set a value here. So you're going to define something like string value. If value is not equals to blank, something like that is not equals to blank, then you will set the value in this name. We will do an example, but this is what the getters and the setters does. Get is to retrieve the value from, retrieve the value. It's going to just return that. And set is basically to set some value, and inside of set, you will put a validation. When we will do an example, you will understand it. Okay.
Yeah.
But understand that name is marked as private. Okay. Name would be private. And anytime when you are doing dot name, so then a getter would be called. If you say dot name equals to something, then a setter will be called behind the scene. Let's do an example later, and then we will see the difference between a getter and a setter.
Gotcha. And but for any private variable, we need a get and set.
Yes, because otherwise, how will you access them?
Gotcha.
Otherwise, there is no point of having those private variables when you're not able to set any values in them. So you will need a getter and setter to set some values, or within the class, somebody else is setting some value for those variables. Because within the class, you can access the private variable. Outside the class, you cannot access those variables.
Right, but for public, we don't need get and set. Is that
For
correct?
which one?
For public.
Public, no. For public, you don't need.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. Always make your variables private and the methods, getters and setters, public.
Methods public, variables private.
Private,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's do some examples. So here I have a class, some simple student class here. Let me go to the okay, and inside of this class, I have a variable string. And now if I want to set up some value, I can do this. Okay, and I can say, is it allowed? st.name is equals to Deepika. And then here I can say system.of_debug. Okay, what is going to be the output of this program?
Value of name Deepika.
Okay, and if I do, so this is going to be the output, right? Because this is a public variable and you are trying to create, and first, this is an instance variable, not a static variable. So you have to create the object first. then you are calling the dot operator and then st dot of name, and then you're setting up the value, which you can do it. And then you are printing the value. So the simple answer, wait a minute. It's debug.
Debug is missing.
Yeah, I got it. So the name is here. But moment I change this from public to private, and if I try to execute it, what's going to be the output?
There's an error.
The error.
It is going to throw an error, right? Reason is, where will it throw an error? At which line?
Number
Second.
two.
Second.
Very
Number
good.
two.
Because here, as you're trying to set up the name property, but the name property is private. So nobody outside of the class, it's not going to see it. And it says variable is not visible. And what is a variable which is not visible? The name variable. Okay. Okay. Now the next one is private access modifier. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a class here. File, new Apex class, account helper.
And for that one, if you want to just we need to set the name or get the name for the last example you had, like st.name. How can we do that if you want
So
to?
then we will do it in getters and setters.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Then we will create a getter and a setter, and then I'll show you how that is done.
Yeah.
So account helper here, just bear with me. We will cover those also. And then here, this is your counter class. Everybody give me the answer in the chat. Okay. So this is my, what's going to be the output here? Look at it carefully and then tell me what's the output.
The class, the variable is private, so it cannot access, right?
Yes.
So you have to make it public first.
Okay, that's a good catch. So this is, I'm not changing anything. What is going to be the output when I try to hit the execute?
11.
It's gonna only show the system debug and 10. Sorry.
No.
Oh, no, it's not gonna, and it's not gonna increment because it's not gonna count. So
This is going to error out right away because it sees ah.counter and it's going to say,
it's
hey,
private.
it's
Okay.
private, and I'm trying to set up a 10 value in something private. I cannot do that. So moment you hit execute, it says variable is not visible. Okay, so always look it up when what is in the debug statements. So this is wrong. So now if I comment this piece of line, now what's going to be the output?
1.
1.
1.
Everybody agrees on 1 because ah.increment,
it's only one time,
counter plus plus, so 0 becomes 1, and then get counter is returning the value of counter. Counter is what? 1. So this is going to return you 1 here. Okay, the next one we have now, the another one is the protected one. So remember I told you, as long as it's inheritance, the protected variables will also be those get inherited. So here I created a class, and that class has a variable defined. Now, if I go ahead and create another class, and this extends and here I'm going to say okay.
Do we need to write virtual on the parent class?
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Now, in this case, if I do something like this, okay, guys, what's going to be the output here?
I think it will error out because this method does not exist in the parent class.
It is petrol. It is protected and the child class can use that variable.
No, what was the first one? So somebody gave a pretty good answer. What was that?
So the parent class does not have this show engine method, so it will error out.
Very good. Excellent. It is going to error out because first it will look at does the vehicle class contains the show engine? And then when it is actually executing, it will go ahead and, sorry, if I go ahead, instead of doing this, I would have done this. Let's do this one. What's going to be the output now?
In this case, it will just execute this parent class method. Show engine type. Just go there. Yeah, it will print petrol, I think.
Yeah, it
It'll
will print petrol.
Okay. So because it's protected. Now, if I go ahead and, so this time it's going to give you petrol, but now let's say if I make this from protected to private, now what's going to happen?
Error out.
What else? Anybody else have any other questions? Answers?
Because
See,
the class, the subclass is the child class is the public, so it's going to only show the engine type.
no.
It's a public, right?
Class is public, but engine type is
Yeah.
Engine
is
type is
private.
not declared.
It is not declared. Oh, okay.
So engine type is something, it's private. So any car class has no idea about engine type. So it doesn't even know that this variable exists. So when you try to do this one, show engine, it is going to give you this variable is not visible. Okay, so you can see here the variable is not visible. As long as this variable was declared public or it's declared protected, then this car class will inherit it. But if it is declared private, then nobody can access this variable outside of this vehicle class. So if I try to execute this, it is going to give me, what is it going to give me? Null? No, wait a minute. Oh, I made it public. That's why. If I make it private, and if I try to execute it, it's going to give me the error saying variable is not visible because this is marked as private variable. Did you understand the difference between protected and public?
Yeah, so basically when we have public, we have access everywhere. If there's
Yeah.
if there is protected, we can use inheritance.
Yeah, only in the child classes you will get the access.
Right.
Okay?
But for private, it's not gonna work.
It's not going to work at all. And global, you can think of, it is basically if you are creating a REST resource, okay? In those cases, when you are creating a REST resource, another system is calling your APIs. In that case, you will mark the class and the methods as global. Okay? So these are when are you going to use this method? Most of the time, global will be used when your external systems are consuming your APIs. Then you will mark them as global. Okay? If you use public instead of global, external systems won't be able to call it. So you always, when you are creating an API, then you will have to mark them as global so that the external system can access your APIs. Now let's talk about getters and the setters. Now, before I talk about the getters and the setters, let's first understand this. I'm creating a class here called employee. Okay, an employee class has, you can see, okay, so this is what I've done. So I created two variables, name value and age value. These are two instance variables, and both of them are marked as private. Okay, so what I'm saying here, I'm saying I created a name property for validation purposes. So this property basically has two methods, getters and the setters. Okay, you can, you basically, when you say something like, because this is private, right? So you created a public string getters and the setters, and here you created a first method. You can think of it as a get property. It is returning you what name value. Okay. And in the set, you basically always use this variable called value. You cannot use anything else besides value. You're checking whenever this set is being called, you're checking what is the value they are trying to set. If the value they're trying to set is a blank, then it is going to throw an exception. If the value's length is also less than 2, then also it is going to throw an exception. Otherwise, if everything is good, if the value is not blank and is also not less than, length is also not less than 2, then it is going to set up the proper value in this name value. And similarly, you can do it over here for the age as well. So they said you can define the names and getters and the setters separately or within this name value. Since I have marked this as private, what I did is I created another property, name and age. And here I am checking, there is a getter method which will return you the age value, and the setter method I'm checking if the value is null. If you're trying to set up a blank value, then it is going to give you an exception. You can see here, if the value is less than 18 or value is greater than 60, then also it is going to give you an exception. Otherwise, it will set up the value that you're trying to set. Now, if I execute, if I go ahead and call this, how to invoke it. So if I'm going to do something like this, employee class is equals to new of employee. So over here, I'm creating an object of this employee class. Now, when I say employee dot of name equals to, then here the setter method will be called of this name. Okay. When I say employee dot of name equals to, automatically it's going to call the setter method. Which setter method? Of the name one. Okay. Here, what value are you trying to put? Deepika. So here you're checking, hey, is the value blank? No, it is not. You're trying to set up a Deepika value. So this is not blank. So this if block won't get executed. Then it is checking, hey, is the length of the value is less than 2? No, it is more than 2. So this also won't get executed. So it will come over here and it will set this value of Deepika into this name value, which is nothing but this variable. So your name value is equals to Deepika. Okay. Similarly, you have employee dot of age now is equals to 30. This is calling the setter method on the age. Okay. Which is which one? So if you scroll down, the setter method is over here, age value. Now it is checking what are you trying to set up? 30. So 30 will go to this value. Is it null? No. So this won't get executed. Is the value less than 18? No. Is it greater than 60? No. So this also won't get executed. So then this age 30 will be set to age value. So age value is equals to 30. Now, when you do something like this, emp dot of name without the equal to sign, so behind the scene, the getter method will be called. Which getter method? This getter method, which you have defined for the name, this one. Similarly, when you do emp.of_age, the getter method of the age will be called, which is this one. So this is how you can define the, I can do something like this also. No, this is all I do. So here you can see if I get rid of this. So what is going to be the output here? The output is going to be, is it going to be any exception thrown?
No.
No, so it's going to print employee.of_name equals to Deepika and age is 30. Now here, this is how you prevented to put a bad value in the name or the age. Because inside of this, you are basically checking what am I trying to put. And the value is this is the keyword you have to use. If you try to use A, B, C, it won't work. Salesforce has already defined something, and that is what you have to use. So when you say employee.name equals to Deepika, then which method is called? The setter method is being called. When you say employee.age equals to 30, the setter method of age will be called. And then here, when you're not using the equals to, then the getter method of the name will be called. Here, the getter method of the age will be called. And this is how they prevented from setting up a bad value in the name and age. If you try to put something like this, now what's going to happen?
It was an error.
Filter
It
exception.
will give you an exception, and this is the exception it is going to give you. Name cannot be blank, okay? And value is less than also 2, and this also is going to happen. Okay, so if you go ahead and execute it, you're going to get the aura handled exception.
So we need to write getter and setter for each variable.
For each variable, you have to write a getter and setter if you want to set up a proper data inside that variable.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And when you say property, means
This is
you're defining a method, right?
this one, yeah, you can call it as this one is more of a just call it as a method, get method for the name and the set method, but it's not exactly defined as a method. But yeah, you usually they call it as a getter and a setter.
Okay.
So, Deepika, I'm confused regarding the order of execution. When you are getting the returning the value first and setting the value after.
No, I am setting the value first and then it is returning the value.
No, in the class.
So it doesn't matter. See here, the order in which I could have put this whole thing before then these at the bottom. I could do that because the order of the class doesn't matter.
Okay.
What matters is how you're
invoking it. Okay.
Yeah. You're calling them based on first setting up the value and then you are calling the getter method.
Okay.
Okay.
But this is kind of a best practice in terms of like it works like as a validation rule.
Yes. For that prop, yeah, it's kind of like a validation for that specific field. For that particular instance variable, not field. I will say it instance variable. Okay.
So Deepika, one question, right? So we already have two variables, name and age. Again, we are creating name and age name value and age value. Again, we are creating name and age, right? Line number 7 and probably line number 21 or 22. So what's the benefit because we could have defined the getter and setters for these two also, right? Name value and age value.
Yeah, but the reason I defined is because I made these variables as private.
So we can define a getters and setters means
I have to declare this as public, and then you will specify. I have an example for that. So then here you will specify a getter and a setter. Something like that. And then inside of the getter also, you can define this whole thing. If the string value is, let me see an example. 1 second. I have to see which one I put it. There is one example. I know what you're saying. I exactly know why are we doing multiple ones.
Why I'm asking, because in Java, right? So since I'm from Java background, so I know that this is something we don't need to define a separate variable to define getter and setters. So is this the only way in Apex, or is there a different pattern that
This
we are
is the
using?
only way I have to. Let me see 1 second. I have to see one. What happened to my AI mode? Why the AI is not working?
I think click on the AI mode at the top,
Where do you
hopefully.
see?
Left side, just where you type, just below that. All videos, images, just leftmost.
Oh, thank you. But then here. See here, this one doesn't have a validation in there. You can use the same getter and setter, and behind the scene it is going, but the validation is not there. Now here,
No.
if I say,
If you see here, right, this example which is just shown, explicit setter method with validation logic, we can do that also as well, right?
1 second, yeah. Oh, yes, this is the one you're looking for, right?
No,
Here also they've created a separate variable.
so my question
No,
is, can't so
yes, you
instead
can
of,
do it. See here, this is what you're looking for, right? Yeah. See, they created this public string email. Inside of that, they have added a getter method, which returns the contact email, which is this one. Or it is, no, they have not created it. They created
it
a,
is whatever you have done, it is same. So can
yeah,
you
this is,
put your
yeah.
notepad, please?
I know what you're saying. You're saying, let's say public class employee. And then what you're saying is,
Private one variable.
okay, then what you want me to do?
No, so define this as a private variable, close the statement, and define a public getter setters for both of them. Public, just next time,
Oh,
public.
that we can do it. Public get name. Sorry,
Correct.
it's gonna be string get name, and then this is going to return you. Yes, you can do this. Return name, and then here you can have public void set name. Let's run this also. It takes in a value, string value. And if value is not equals to null, you are basically saying, this is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is allowed. Name is equals to value. This is allowed. So this one, but then you're explicitly, yeah, this is perfectly allowed. So if I go here and then try to create it, you will see a getter method and then a setter method to check if the value they're trying to put is the correct value. Yes, this is perfectly all right. You can do this.
Yeah. So if we can do that, so what's the point of having creating another variable?
It
Are we
was, no, we don't have to create another variable. This one was just marking those main variables as private. That's why I created this way. So if you go back to the class, I created these two variables as private, and these were the property to access to basically route them through. But I could have created the same, what you're saying, I could have done that. Public string get name. And this method would
Name
be
value.
return name value. And here I can say public void set name value. And this takes in a parameter. Let's see. And then here you can say if Control C. If string dot this is correct, then it is good. Otherwise, it's going to return this. And then here we got rid of it. Now on this case, now what you're going to do is you will say employee emp dot of set name value. And then you will pass in Deepika. And then here you will say employee dot of age, we won't do it. So here, if I have to call system dot of debug employee name is here, emp dot of get name. Yes, this is allowed. It shouldn't be, this would be marked as private. And this is exactly what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this should work. So employee name Deepika. So this is one way, and that one that I showed you is the another way.
So is there any difference that performance wise or anything that are we that the Salesforce has provided this way or that both the ways, right?
So over there, it was, see, the only difference is the way you're calling it. If you look at it over here, you're invoking based on the methods. Over there, you're invoking this as the property. And then behind the scene, those methods are being called automatically. So that is the only difference. But otherwise, it is doing pretty much the same thing. So if you remember the other way, we are calling the dot of, sorry, what was that? Dot name and then dot age. And behind the scene, it was invoking the setter and the getter. Over here, you have to explicitly call the getters and the setters.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Would that make sense if we use the constructor model and just define those get and set in different classes?
That's one way. That's definitely one way of doing it, that within the constructors, you can put the validation, 100%. That is perfectly all right.
In different class, okay.
Yeah. Like basically you made these two variables private, and then you have a constructor and you're checking within that constructor that what values are allowed, and then you throw the validations if you're trying to set up a bad value. You can do the validation through the constructor also.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So now there is another example here. So you can see this is what one was using their own get name and set name. This we already done it. Then here is this one we did it. Then I'll find another class here called employee, and inside of this class, we can define this variable. Okay. And then when I'm invoking it, I can do something like this. So over here, what will be the output? So now you created a getters and setters. So this is how you define getters and setters. Default means behind the scene you can use. So when you're doing e dot of first name, it is calling the set method of this first name. When you do e dot of last name, it is calling the set method and setting up the last name. Now here you're saying e dot of full name. So which one will call? This one will call the getter method. And what is this going to return? This is saying first name plus space and then last name. So here you basically kind of formatted your output in the way you want it. So this is going to result sim and then space and alloc. So you can see here, wait a minute. Why is it not working? Oh, employee class.
Do we need track itself?
I didn't do
for
save
that?
it. I didn't save it, that's why. So you can see here, it gave you the better output. So this is how you define a getter and a setter. And the reason is you basically set the variables as private, and then the even though you write it like this, e dot of first name, but actually behind the scene, it is calling the setter method. Okay. And similarly, you have written it this way, but you are actually calling the setter method for the last name. So you can define a proper setter method, which will basically do the validation as well.
Okay, but it should be private, right? You define
No,
it as
but
private.
see, behind the
It doesn't
scene,
matter.
see it doesn't matter. If you make this as if you make this one as private, then this is not going to work. So let's go ahead and do that, because these methods become, let's see, you can see variable is not visible. So you have to make it public, but behind the scene, it is calling the getters and the setters.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So you can see here. Now let me see another example. You can do formats, pretty easy. These are all. Okay, let's do another method here. I can do something like this also. Order class, inside of the order, I can set up a setter method here as private. You can see also. So now the getter is public, but the method setter is private. Now if I try to execute this one, now tell me what's going to be the output. O dot of order ID. What is behind the scene what is going to be the output? Let's say, look at this code and look at this code. What's happening?
It will throw an error
Why will it throw an error?
because this setter is being private and
Very
we are
good. Which line is throwing an error?
line number 2 as of now.
No,
O dot
no.
order ID.
Which line?
Sorry. Line
Five.
number
Four.
Five.
four. Line number 4. Yeah, where we are setting the values.
Exactly. So at
Yeah.
this line, what is it being called?
It is getter method.
And this line, what is being called?
Setter.
Setter method. So if I comment this piece, now what's going to be the output?
It will give you some OID, some math random value.
Very good.
Yeah.
So this is going to call the constructor, and the constructor is right here. And inside of the constructor, you're setting up the value of order ID, and you're saying order ID starts with ORD, and this is a function method available in the math class, and you're formatting it. So this is going to give you a formatted random number, and I think it's going to give you a decimal number, I believe so. And then here you are just displaying that order ID. So if I go ahead and execute it, you can see the output is going to be ORD 0.648. Now, if I run it again, it will generate a different random number. So every time you run this, it's going to give you a different random number. So this method already exists in the math class, and it generates a random output. But here, my method was over here, my setter is private. So what happened was, if I'm trying to do something like this will give an error. So if I try to uncomment this, execute it, you can say variable is not visible. And line number 4 is the place where it gave you the error. Any questions?
So we have a private set, right?
Yes. Yes.
If we want to define the value, how can we do that? Or is not possible at all?
Like define the value for this one, then you have to make it public.
Public. Okay.
Yeah, and then set the value.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
So Deepika, in a nutshell, so getter is you're gonna access the variable,
Yes.
and the setter is the same variable you are setting up or updating whatever the function you're using.
Exactly. You're setting up
Right?
the value for that variable.
Variable.
Correct.
Okay.
And getter is to fetch the value back. So getter will always have a return type. A setter's return type will be void because it is
Void.
setting up the
It's
value.
a setting up the value.
But
It's a
it will
constructor.
accept a parameter. So this is how a getter method would be. A getter method will have a return type. Okay, it will be other than void, will have a return type. And the setter method will have a void as the return type, but it will accept a parameter. So it could be string, it could be a count, it could be whatever. So it will accept a parameter, but this one will only return something.
Yeah, like constructor. Okay. Right.
Okay. Constructor is setting up the value, and you could have done the validation within the constructor itself. Okay, so if that constructor accepts some parameters from this anonymous window, here they can check, hey, what are you trying to put? So constructor can also be a good place for validation, but getters and setters is also a place where you can check some validations by defining your getters and the setters method. Okay?
Okay, what are the use cases? Just wanna just wanna
One of
see.
the use cases is when for which one? For the getters and setters?
Yeah, what
Yeah,
you
it
usually use.
basically, the use cases is when you're trying to set a value, which you will do it often whenever you are passing it from the UI or anything you're trying to set up these values, you will make sure that you are checking those values that they're trying to put it into those variables. And that's when you're going to use it. So everywhere you write the code, you are going to have a getter and setter defined. Okay, and the variables would be private. It's not something that it's always going to be there. You're going to have a getters and setters and a private variable defined. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, guys. Then the next thing we have is the SOQL and SOSL statements. Do you want to talk about them today and then continue it tomorrow, or you want to wrap it up and then we'll start fresh tomorrow on SOQL and SOSL?
If we wrap it up, that would be great.
I shouldn't ask that question from anybody. Everybody says wrap it up.
Sorry about that. I have a question actually.
Yeah,
So
go
then
ahead.
for the global variables, we use it for outbound calls as well as inbound calls too, right? Or just for inbound
See,
calls?
okay. If you understand when you say outbound call, you are calling the external system. That you are calling the external system, that is an outbound call. Inbound is when somebody is calling your system. That's an inbound call that is coming from an external system. So if this external system is calling your APIs, your Apex classes, then that Apex class needs to be global. Here it doesn't matter because you are the one making the call to the external system. So you're calling their APIs, their endpoints. So outbound doesn't matter. Inbound, because the call is coming to your system. If that system can't even see your Apex class, how are they going to call it?
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
So this one needs to be global, not the outbound. Okay?
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Now, another point, guys, I would give you a little, I'll give you an assignment, but I also wanted you to talk about, to learn a little bit about HTTP headers and all that, because once we will get into integration also. So knowing a little bit about HTTP, GET and POST, having Postman installed will help you. How many of you have worked with Postman before?
I did.
I did. I did.
Okay, so everybody knows what Postman is, what is a get methods.
No, no, Deepika, I don't have any idea at all.
Okay, so tomorrow if you have time, please install Postman on your machine, see what Postman is, test some APIs, and we will do some integration soon. Okay, but tomorrow we will talk about SOQL and SOSL statements. And then eventually in next couple of days, we will start with a little bit of integration. Okay? Okay, guys, I will see you tomorrow then.
Okay,
8 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
thank you.